Well, hello again. I'm very happy to say that the sun has come out again. My God, if the rain will never stop. Seems like every time I open up a video, I'm talking about the rain. That's because that's all it's been doing here. Day after day, week after week. It's incredible. I hope we get at least I'd like to have at least a 10-day break when I can get something done. We love the rain here, trust me. In the summertime, Arkansas heat is so bad, we love a little rain, but we don't want everything to burn up and cook. So it's nice to have it, but you know, we also need a little break once in a while. So anyway, what we're going to do today is we're back on the Thunderbird. Today we're going to tear everything that's left apart. This strut right here, that strut's coming out. It's going to come down. It's going to come loose from the lower control arm. I'm also going to take it loose back there where it goes up into the, see that round spot there where the rod goes in? That's coming out. It's got a big nut on the other side. We're going to get rid of this brake line right here, and we're going to take down the lower control arm itself. Everything's going to be gutted out, and there's going to be one other thing we'll do before we finish up, I hope. So let's get started. Now this is the kind of problem you don't want to run into. This is the end of the strut right here where it comes through this bracket, and the bushings on each side of these, you know, this half moon thing and this one over here you can see. The problem is, look how that cotter pin is put in. They put it in from the bottom up through the top and then split it apart on the other side. Well, how am I supposed to unsplit that? I think the only thing I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to have to wind up taking it loose, take the other end of the strut loose, and then turn it around so this will turn that cotter pin around to the bottom where I can close that split and then turn it back around. But after I turn it around, I'm kind of hoping I can run something down through here to hold it in place while I unloosen the nut, if I have the right size wrench. That's another problem. Well, let's see what I can do by getting this the nuts off of this thing here first. If you take a look, these are some pretty big ones here. There's two of them down there that hold the other end of the strut on. One is right here and the other one is here. They've got to come off. Then I can maybe flip it around or somehow use a pair of vice grips to hold this in place while after I spin it around to get the cotter pin at the right spot. And so let's go ahead and I'll show you what I have since bought since the last video. That Campbell Hausfeld, I guess it's Hausfeld impact wrench I bought earlier from Walmart turned out to be just a piece of crap. It just wouldn't work at all. Come to find out, I decided to fill out the warranty on it in the paperwork, and it's had a place down there where you put the serial number, so I went down and somebody had already filled in the serial number by ink, you know. So what that told me was someone else had bought that previous to me, found out it didn't work. I guess they filled in the serial number. It didn't work. They took it back to Walmart, and all Walmart did was put it up on the shelf. I couldn't believe it. I took it back. I said, take this off my hands. I don't want it anymore. They did, and then I went over to Harbor Freight and I picked up this Earthquake 3/8" impact wrench. It's got a lot of good reviews. Everybody says it's great. It's got a 350 foot-pound breakaway torque. Well, what does 350 foot-pound breakaway torque means? It means if you got a bolt that's been tightened down to 350 pounds, this baby is supposed to be able to break it loose and get it out of there. Now, it won't torque up to 350, I don't think. It's the breakaway torque. So what we're going to do is use this to get some of those nuts off at the bottom. This has got really good reviews, like I said, so we're fixing to find out. Alright, the object here is not to twist your hand off when you're, doing it one-handed is not a very bright idea. I won't be doing it one-handed. This is a, what size bolts are they? It's a, hang on a second, I think it's a 15/16. Yeah, it is a 15/16 that holds this strut arm to the lower control arm here. You got those two nuts to take off. Plus I have a whole lot of mud wasp nest to clean out before I can get that lower control arm off too. That's going to be a booger in itself. You can see how dented that thing is. Look at that. It's almost as if somebody did mudding with this car. Oh God. Well, let me see what I can do. See if it'll break the bolts loose. This is what the top of the bolts look like. They're square. They're square and they're in a holder, kind of a square. It'll help keep them from turning. I may have to get a pair of vice grips and put on them anyway. Well, let's get cranked up on it, see what I can do. there are no cotter pins holding these on down here. They're just self-locking type nuts. So let me get both hands on this thing and then I'll see if I can get them off. Well, they came off. This one here came right out with no problem as soon as I stuck the socket on it and hit the switch. This one here was so tight I had to, it was rusted or something, I had to take a breaker bar and kick it loose just a touch, and then it came off the rest of the way with the impact wrench. Now let's see if I can turn this baby over so I can get to those cotter pins. She's turning over now. Whether or not I can get to those cotter pins is something else. I may have to turn it a second time once I get them spread. Then we'll bring this back up and maybe somehow I can find a way to hook it nice and tight while I go back there and undo that nut. And I was kind of hoping to be able to get that nut off while it was still fastened here. It's going to be kind of hard to do when you know this thing's going to be turning around, but we'll see what happens. Alright, I found a place where I could take one of those square bolts I just removed. I just kind of pulled it over and lined up the holes and ran it down through and put the nut on by hand on the bottom. It screwed almost 3/4 of the way back onto the bolt. The nut did underneath, so we're nice and secure there. Now let's go back over and see if I can remove that cotter pin back there and see if I have a wrench big enough to fit the nut. If I don't, another problem, you know. Alright, the cotter pin is pushed all the way through as far as it'll go, and now it's hitting the top of the body under here. So now I have to flip that thing around the other way. So see it up in there? It's hitting right there. You can see it up there. I can't even find my finger in the camera, but it doesn't matter. You can see it right there, yeah. And I can't get anything up in there to bend it over. So I'll just turn it around the other way so that loop is downward, and then I'll pull it out. Alright, here it is. The strut is out. Here are the parts, and here's how they work. You have a plate that goes on like so. It goes on first, like that. Then you have one of these rubber things, bushings, that fits inside the plate. That goes on like that next. Then you have this rod that goes down through the center. Then you have this other bushing. Now one bushing fits inside of another. If you'll notice, this thing has a sunk-in hole right here. This thing here will fit down inside that. When they're together, they'll be completely together. One on each side of that bracket, that metal bracket on the car. And once that's like that, that's like that, and that's like that, then the other plate goes on, and the whole thing will slip on. Well, actually, it's one at a time. You know, this whole thing's going to be de-rusted when I get done. It'll be nice and shiny and painted and looking good. You know how I am about that. If it's not right, it won't go back on the car. That's the way it is. And if it takes 6 months, that's what we do. Now here's the new bushings that I purchased. I told you quite a while ago I had them. I bought them from Ann out there in North Carolina. These will have to be separated, but right, you know, just like these were right here, because one slides, this collar here slides inside that large hole. It's not so easy to get out. I'm probably going to have to use a little silicone and everything, because it comes with that metal rod or pipe down the center, tube. So I've got to figure out how to get that apart. I'll probably use a little silicone spray, like I said, and then once I get this all cleaned up, by that time I'll have it apart. But this is what they look like. And then when you put them in there, one goes on one side of that bracket, one goes on the other, and then they pull together as you tighten up the nut here. Okay, I'm a little pooped. I'm ready for a cup of coffee. Now, removing the lower control arm is impossible to get out by taking that horizontal bolt out and that nut. There's not enough clearance on each side for the nut, the bolt to slide out. You can't. It'll go over and it'll hit the body of the car. The only way you can get the lower control arm out is to, on the rear, there's a large bolt. There's the large bolt right there, and it's got a nut on the other side. And when you take that out, then of course this thing here has to come out. I don't know what the purpose of that is. It's loose as a goose. Has a nut on the other end, but it's loose. I don't know, maybe that's for alignment purposes when you put it in or something. But anyway, I've got the nut loose on the other side. I had to spray it with PB Blaster and soak it. These are 15/16 is the size of that thing right there on the nut on the other side. I got it loose and I'm taking it off. and when I do, this entire control arm will come down to include the bracket with it. And I've got to take that little nut, that little piece of crap out of there too. So let me get to it. Alright, she's nice and open there now. Okay, we've got 2 more things to do before we can wrap this video up. Actually, I guess 3 things if you can't clean up all the mud wasps. I gotta sweep that up. I can't work down here and all that. Look at all the mud wasp nests that came out from underneath that. It was just this one area up there where the lower control arm was. We'll get to the next 2 items next after I clean up. You know, if that old boy that sold me this car knew that this had this much mud under there, and we're not even done yet. The whole center of the car is covered too. We haven't even got to the other side. If he knew we were taking this much dirt away from his place, he probably would have charged me for an acre of his land. Well, there she is, and I found out what this small bolt was for. It was to hold these shims in place. There's 2 thick ones and 2 thin ones that were put in at the factory, which aligned this, I guess, up to the right where it needed to be lined up. I'll just put them all back in the same way. There's 4 total in this one. If you have a 66, you may not have 4. You may only have 2. I don't know. Anyway, that's about it. Now the only thing we have to do is remove these 3 bolts, knock out this ball joint, remove this and this, because these I'm not sure, but it looks to me like that on that side of the control arm there's no bushing at all. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that. I've got to find out. And we'll just take this off and take it out, clean it all up and get it squared away. But that's about it. I'll have to do some, I think I better hammer that straight a little bit. It's kind of bent, like I said. That's no problem. But that's about it. Not much more to it. That's that big giant bolt I was telling you about that holds it to the body of the car with a giant lock washer, which I will replace. But we'll have these things looking real good. You all remember what the rear end looked like. It was worse than this. When we got done, it looked pretty nice. And those shims, they go in like this. They go over that large bolt like that. And then this thing here goes all the way through, as you'll recall. That's all there is to it. The nut goes on the outside, the same side that this nut is on, like this. I guess it doesn't make any difference. I don't know how it came loose. That may not even be the right bolt. I don't know. It looks like it, but it's, I don't know. Kind of weird. Well, with the help of the old earthquake, that bolt right there came right on out, which took it right off this bushing. This is a single bushing, by the way. I thought there was a bushing on each side. It's just a single bushing. And I think if I just kind of tap real good right here, I can drive that bushing right on out without causing any bending or damage to this right here. So I've got it sitting on a 2x4. We'll see. And I soaked it real good in that PB blaster. You know, don't, like I said, don't spare the horses when you're working on the front end, especially if you're working on a car from the north. Down here, it's a whole different story. Look at that. 2 little light taps and it just fell right on out of there. Okay, we're going to get a new one of those too. Single bushing. Now we'll go ahead and see if we can't take those bolts and nuts out that hold the lower ball joint in and knock it out. The 3 bolts are out, and they do have a lock washer, and these do come with when, at least they used to. When you have a new ball joint, you're supposed to get 3 of these new bolts, lock washers, and nuts. Because like we told you quite a while ago, the originals were riveted in. You got to knock off the heads, and then this is how they replace them with these here. All right, now see if I can knock out this bottom ball joint. I'm telling you, it's not going to be easy. Give me a hammer. I don't need no. I tell you what, when you're all powerful, you don't need a hammer. That's right. Who needs a hammer? Well, after you get all done, this is what you have left. Just your lower control arm and your strut with the bolts. And these plates, you got one on the top and one on the bottom underneath the nuts. And these things here, the nut and the... now I'm keeping all the pieces and parts. You never know. I could have a heart attack real quick and I have to throw all this stuff back underneath the car, put this coil spring in and get myself to the hospital or something. You never know. Our next job is to remove the valve assembly, which funnels the brake fluid from the master cylinder. The line comes in and goes into that valve assembly. There's 2 of them that goes in. One comes in from the master cylinder right here. The other one goes out to the rear brake lines out of this valve assembly, which is this. all the way back here to the rear wheels. And what I need to do is I need to get that valve assembly out of there because ours is really mangy. And there's one bolt holding it in, but these lines up here going to the master cylinder are just rusty, they're mangy, and I want to take that line that's hanging loose underneath the wheel well too. We'll go back and take another look at that here in a second. But each of the nuts that screw into the master cylinder have been rounded off over the years and they're rusty. So I'm probably going to have to take some vice grips. I did get one line to come out, but there's the other one that comes out of there. The other two, I think it is, they just won't come out. They're just too rounded off. So I'll probably have to take a pair of vice grips and get them loose. Once I get them loose from the master cylinder, then we can go ahead and get this valve assembly out of here. But first we need to find that bolt. Let's find that bolt that holds that thing in. There's the bolt that holds it in. I've been soaking it with that PB blaster. That is a 1/2-inch bolt. And I don't want to take it out. I want to be able to keep that valve assembly in there until I get those lines loose and off of there. Then I can go ahead and unscrew it. So let's go to the top and get those lines off with a pair of vice grips. There you go. Those are the two lines we have to get off the master cylinder. And I got this one. I got the top one off right here. Let me get this light out of the way. This one here came off pretty easy. I mean, it just unscrewed with no problem. But those other two, they're really bears. As you can see, they're all rounded off and ragged. It looks like people have used vice grips on them before. So let's get them out. I'm just going to take a small pair of vice grips. I have a small pair. You don't need to use a big giant pair. I will if I have to, don't get me wrong. But I think a small pair, like this, they're not that large. They work a whole lot better. All the lines are out. Two of them, that one down there came out okay. The two I was working on. This one here just snapped right off. It just didn't even want to come out at all. I had to resort to going to the larger vice grips as well, but it just snapped right off. It didn't even twist or anything. It just popped right off. So no problem because they were going to be replaced anyway. But this thing here, I was kind of hoping to be able to save that. It looks okay. I'll clean it up and we'll see what happens. It's there's a name for this thing. I can't remember what they call it. A distribution block of some kind. There's a name for it. I heard on Jonathan W. He named this thing one day on a master cylinder. He said he was going to have to get a new one of whatever that was. He called it, and I said, man, I didn't even know they had a name. To me, it was just a brass block, distribution block. All right, let's go to that now. That was part of the two things we still have left to do. Over on the table showing you the lower control arm and the strut arm, all that stuff. That was not part of the two things. The two things are coming up now. One of them is to get that valve removed off the car. But before we do that, there's one other thing I want to do first. Now this brake line right here coming down, it went to the caliper on this front wheel. That's one of the lines we just now loosened up. See, I'm getting better. I didn't say unloosen that time. Anyway, I'll just pull that baby on down through because we definitely have to get a new one of those. I'll probably just cut it off or bend it and worm it on down. But that'll leave us with our gas line now. Our gas line has to come off, and it comes out through this where they bent this up. This is no good. I cannot live with that. How could they just bend that thing up like that and expect it to work? And then down here, kink the gas line when they bent it. I guess it worked okay. Somebody must have been happy with the work. But we're taking this splash shield out. Behind this splash shield will tell the tale on this line, this gas line here, because it goes on down, it comes out around the bottom down here, and that gas line is swelled up and it's probably been there for the last 300 years. Can you see it? Let me see. I want to show you. This is kind of interesting. This is, if I get my hand on it here, this is the gas line where it comes up from the rear of the car and the brake line together, okay? The gas line comes up and it goes into a hose, and that hose is hard as a rock, and it's all swollen up on this one end down here where it goes up into the fender, up behind that splash shield. That splash shield's coming off, this hose is coming off. We're going to do this whole mess right, before we start cleaning and all that other stuff and putting it all back together, you know, the lower control arm and the spring and all that. We got to get all this stuff righteous. It's got to be right. I do not want a fire while I'm driving down the road. So let's get the splash shield off. It should come off with a bunch of bolts. If it doesn't, I'll just take the torch to it and that big hammer. Not a problem. Well, let's see what it's going to take to get this splash shield off. We have, obviously they tried to do it before or have done it. They took the bolt out there. This one here will have to come out. This one here will have to come out. I don't know whether they really know what that is. This under the fender brace and bolt will have to come out. There's something up here. It looks like a nut on the end of it. There's one here. We'll have to release it from here. This will have to release it from here. It shouldn't be that difficult. I think there's one behind the gas line over here, and it'll have to come out. There's going to be a lot of picking away of undercoating and just fiddle farting around with it, but I hope to be able to get it off in this video. There's even one up there, a big old rusty one up there that'll have to come off. Oh boy, it's going to be fun. I'm just going to be working on it for the next hour or so, I guess, until I get it right. Well, all the bolts came out. You know, it took a lot of time and effort and finessing, and you had to clean the bolt heads off and dig away the you know, the undercoating that was on there, or the sound deadener is what they referred to it in the books, I think. But you take a little wire brush, you clean the heads off best you can, you pick away that sound deadener or that undercoating, whatever, and eventually they all come out if you have a car from the south. And then this one here, this thing here goes way up in the corner, and on the back side it has a thing that once you get it in place, there's a square hole that this stuff fits into, or this one fits into, and then you go ahead and start tightening it up and it locks it down tight. So right now what we've got is a pretty loose splash shield. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can, maybe I can just take it out right now. I don't know, there's nothing here that's going to break, I'll tell you. Now, let me see what I can do with that thing. Oh man. Anyway, there and down in there is what I'm after, that stupid old gas line and brake line business. Well, let me go ahead and see if I can get it out with two hands. Well, she's out. Now let's see what we've got. Well, right here it looks like we've got a big old rat's nest. Either that was just an accumulation of grass and stuff. I'll be vacuuming all that out later. And we have some stuff here. I don't have any. I know what that is. That's part of the cowling drain tube. It fits up here on this sort of oval looking thing with a clamp around it. I have two brand new ones I bought. Let me get a little clarity on this picture here. There we go. And of course we have our proverbial mud wasp nest. And another one. Oh, this is great. Let me see if I can get that one out. Chip this baby out of here. There's another one gone. Another one bites the dust. And then we have some more here. We'll be doing a lot of vacuuming out. But this here, this is a brake line here. This is another, oh, look at here. They just broke that brake line right off is what they did. And they ran a rubber hose up. There's the other end of it right there. I don't like that at all. That sucks. I'm going to clean all this out and then we're going to do one more segment and we'll call it a day. Well, I almost forgot. I got to take that bolt out of that brass valve assembly. And hopefully I can get it up high enough to get the rear brake line unscrewed from it. Let's see what I can do from the top. But before I do, look at that mess on the floor again. All that stuff. This is the gas line they put in there. They used part of the existing and ran rubber hoses the rest of the way. That's no good. I don't like that at all. And of course that mess there for our brake line totally sucks. Everything I've taken out of the front end of the car, by the way, has been thrown in this box right here. Everything. Bolts, nuts, washers, the works. Keep it in one spot. Now let's open. Here's another brake line. This was the one they cut off and ran a rubber hose. God, unbelievable. They could have done better than that. And here's a brake line clip we need to put in our little box. All right, let me see what I can do by getting that valve assembly up out of there. Well, there's our little valve assembly. You know, I'll go ahead and take these lines out probably tomorrow. I thought it was made out of brass. It's not. It's cast metal of some kind. Pretty rusty. I'm going to soak it a couple of days. You know, after we get the lines out, we'll soak it a couple of days. And the vinegar, I bought a couple of new gallons of vinegar, and we'll see if we can't salvage this thing. I don't see why not. It's just I don't know what's down inside there. Maybe one of you smart guys can tell me what's down there. They call it a valve assembly for some reason. There must be some kind of maybe a plunger assembly down there of some kind. I don't know. But that's what she looks like in the 66. Well, that's it, folks. We accomplished everything we wanted to do today. I've got it all cleaned up. Tools are all put back. Down here is going to be a handy-dandy little place for me to... Let me see if I can zoom in here. Yeah, a little handy-dandy brake line right there that I can go ahead and hook up my air hose and blow out the entire brake line all to the rear of the car. We'll do that next time. And, you know, between now and then, I'll also vacuum all this out and clean it up and everything. I don't think you guys are much interested in watching me vacuum up. I've got more mud wasp nets up in there. See them? God, they're just everywhere. Anyway, I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. I sure did. Those of you who have 64 to 66 Thunderbirds, all of everything you saw today was going to be pretty much the same. You know, there's also a splash shield in the front here that can be removed. This one right here. And that one there, the front and the rear can be taken out. So I guess until next time, I hope you enjoyed it. This is John.